To All the Boys I've Loved Before should be another forgettable teen movie. It's based on a popular book, has a hot jock, a pretty bookworm, a dead mom, a quirky best friend, a mean girl, and a love that develops based on a lie. But unlike the other modern, generic teen movies, there's one thing it doesn't have: a 15% score on Rotten Tomatoes. Instead, it has a 96. This miracle was made possible because of two reasons. One, To All the Boys subverts these common tropes so that generic becomes genius. And two, it respects the audience. Yeah, this is a movie for teenagers, okay, but it isn't cheap or nonsensical like the endless trash we keep getting. Fun, lighthearted teen rom-coms deserve quality too, and this should absolutely be the standard they strive for. So how does it do this specifically? I'm gonna break this down by starting with the main character, Lara Jean. The shy, innocent good girl is a common character in many teen movies. Jamie in A Walk to Remember, Tessa in After, Lainey in She's All That. Lara Jean falls into this category of characters too. She's a 16-year-old introvert who's never had a boyfriend but dreams of love. She's far from generic though. For one, Lara Jean may be shy, but she doesn't shrink from bullying. She easily defends herself against Jen, her ex-best friend turned popular mean girl.
Cute boots. Thank you so much for your service.
They're vintage. When I got them on Etsy.
She also doesn't shy away from conversation.
Oh no, don't push her. She's shy.
What do you want to know?
And battles belittling with kindness.
Can I get you anything? Like a juice box or chocolate milk?
You know, actually, Peter's going to get me a drink. But thank you so much for offering.
She's a great example that quietness doesn't have to equal weakness. Often, these types of characters let people walk all over them or need a guy to punch someone. Lara Jean's sweetness is held up so well by the genuine and beautiful performance of Lana Condor. I truly don't think anyone could play Lara Jean as perfectly as she does. My favorite way she differs, though, is that Lara Jean has style. Do you know how rare it is for the shy girl to not look frumpy or clueless? I personally really relate to the bookworm character, so I am so happy to see how refreshing Lara Jean looks. She loves high socks, heels, bows, and skirts. It's very vintage meets girly. Her passion for fashion correlates with her character in the book the movie is based on, which has several passages describing Lara Jean coordinating her outfits. Jenny Han, the author, was significantly involved in the movie's production process, going so far as to create mood boards for her style. I actually think her involvement is one of the main reasons why this movie is so good. Also, I was a huge book reader growing up, and I still am, but this is one of the only book series I didn't read as a teenager. But if you have, can you please let me know if you think this is a good adaptation or not? I think a lot of YA book adaptations just can't capture the magic of the books, which I talked about in my Hunger Games video if you haven't seen that. Anyway, Jenny Han said in an interview that Lara Jean is a more introverted, internal person, and her clothes are a way for her to show that this is me. So instead of hiding behind a disheveled appearance, like so many quiet girls do in movies, Lara Jean uses fashion to express what she otherwise can't say. Her individualized style is contrasted with Genevieve. Jen makes fun of her unique shoes while she wears basic Uggs. I have to say, I do relate to Jen though, because I also love my Uggs, and for the same reason she does.
You know what, Chrissy? Screw you, because you know that my feet are always cold.
Similarly, when most girls might wear a tight little black dress to a party, Lara Jean chooses a cute but conservative collared dress and bomber jacket. These are intentional choices by the costume designer, Rafaela Rabinovich, I hope I'm saying that right, to show that Lara Jean doesn't feel pressure to wear what is expected of her. I like this more subtle approach because oftentimes the awkward outsider is characterized by an extreme gothic style, but that doesn't define every loner. Lara Jean doesn't realize people admire her outfits. She has to ask her only friend, Chris, if her boots actually look cool, and blushes when she receives compliments on her style. This adds a layer of complexity to her character. She has the confidence to wear what she wants, but doesn't yet have the confidence to think others like it too. Lara Jean's identity isn't just expressed through her fashion, but also through the beautiful sets and colors of her world. I do not know why more teen movies don't prioritize visuals more. I'd argue that teenagers, especially girls, are the most likely to be attracted to cute fashion, sets, and overall aesthetics. The dystopian movies are the absolute worst offenders of this. One of the reasons I was inspired to make this video is because of the Uglies trailer. I kid you not, I paused it at the very first frame. I genuinely did that, and I thought, why are these movies always so gray? Also, let me know if you want a video on that movie, because I have read that book, and disappointed doesn't even begin to describe my thoughts. The creative team of To All the Boys understood that a teen movie doesn't mean it has to look cheap. The Mean Girls musical movie could also learn from them, as we know. For example, the director, Susan Johnson, cinematographer, Michael Famignari, and production designer, Paul Joyal, created what they called the book, which outlined a mood board and colors for the entire movie. They established a palette of teal, yellow, and pink to reflect Lara Jean's sweetness, whimsy, and love of romance. These colors dominate almost every shot. Maybe you noticed the teal in Lara Jean's bedroom, but did you notice it in the kitchen, airport, cafeteria, track, library, bathrooms, diner, Kitty's helmet, or Lara Jean's bike? Not only that, but Lara Jean is often dressed in shades that match the background, like on her bed with her sister, or outside the diner. Even if you don't consciously notice these details, it doesn't mean they're not important. In fact, it's a big reason why this movie feels so much more elevated than a typical teen movie. And actually, these small details add to the story. For example, the color palette is the strongest in Lara Jean's bedroom, which is one of my favorite sets. I think this is such a beautiful space, but it's the strongest here because it's where she lives most of her life. The production designer said that since she, quote, lived with her books and her strong imagination, we decided to make her room a reflection of her fantasy world. Lara Jean is sentimental and a lover of the past, often referencing old movies and actors. In her room, much of her furniture is upcycled vintage. Her desk is a repainted vanity. She also uses an old steamer trunk as a wardrobe. Her love of books is proudly on display, which features a lot of romance, but also classics like Nancy Drew. Even her style is vintage, with many pieces referencing the 60s and 90s. The hand-painted floral mural matches Lara Jean's romance and whimsy, and the messiness of her room mirrors her mental state, which gets more chaotic as her life unravels. Contrast this with the room of her older sister, Margot, who's moving out and easily throws things away. Unlike Lara Jean, Margot is practical, realistic, and looks forward. She's Lara Jean's biggest role model since their mom died when she was young. However, Lara Jean is the complete opposite to Margot. She's a chronic daydreamer, creative, and a hopeless romantic. She keeps passionate love letters that she never intends to send hidden in her room for years. Her room is a centerpiece to this movie because it's her safe space, and even more so once Margot leaves. So when her little sister leaks her love letters to bring some excitement into her life, it's panic central. Lara Jean's biggest flaw is her fear of reality and risk, specifically when it comes to love. This is a common fear for many teen characters, Gabriella in High School Musical, or Charlie in The Perks of Being a Wallflower. But Lara Jean's fear is realized in an artistically unique way. For one, the way her crushes materialize in her fantasies is contrasted by a significantly different reality. In her fantasy, Josh wears a cool leather jacket, like a dreamy poet, and Peter wears a groomed suit. Both look straight out of one of her romance novels. But in real life, they both dress super casually, and neither of them are perfect. Her secrecy and fear of vulnerability is also reflected by her love of wearing layers. She always wears a jacket or long-sleeved top to metaphorically protect herself. Her less conforming fashion is actually the riskiest thing about her, but she still has a level of control with what she puts on in the morning. Much of her fear stems from losing her mom at an early age. If her lovers stay in her fantasy, they can never hurt her or leave her. I think this is one of the better ways to incorporate a parental death in a teen story. Have it actually affect the character and not just garner cheap sympathy and never mention it again. This literally happens in The Kissing Booth, which has one of the most whiplash intros I've ever seen in a movie.
Held her hand a long time. Only cried when she was asleep. Trying to score my first kiss with Randy Melrose.
Opposite to the serene, comforting blue of her room, everything she fears is in red. Her car is red because she's an awful driver, which is why she often opts for the comfort of her teal bike. When her sister leaks her letters, she wears a red skirt. Lucas, who is one of the recipients of the letters, wears red shoes when he confronts her. Jen wears a red dress at the party. Margot's earbuds are red when Lara Jean avoids telling her the truth. There's red Christmas lights when Margot finds out the truth. Her jacket is red when she goes on an adventurous ski trip, and again when she confesses her love. It's quite fitting that red is the color of her fears, because red can also be the color of love, which is the thing she fears the most. Speaking of which, let's talk about the boys Lara Jean has loved before. There are 5 letters in total that get sent out, but only 2 boys that are central to this movie, Josh and Peter. What I love most about this is that it isn't a love triangle. Josh was Lara Jean's first boy who was a friend. She didn't realize she liked him until her sister Margot started dating him. Everything becomes backwards when Margot breaks up with him before going to college. This is reflected in the opposite positions on the bleachers. Now Lara Jean sits on the right. In the beginning of the movie, Josh frequents her fantasies. There's also a subtle hint that Lara Jean is hung up on him in her back-to-school outfit. The costume designer mentioned that the slate gray shirt with the wool long sleeves gives the outfit a hint of Josh. You might have also noticed that Josh wears red, but this is only when Lara Jean has a secret crush on him, and she's afraid to admit she likes him. When the letters are released, confronting Josh is the scariest because his was the only letter born out of reality, not fantasy. Plus, he's also his sister's ex-boyfriend. This dilemma sets up her motivations for the fake dating pretty well because she's so avoidant of uncomfortable realities. But unlike your typical teen love triangle, Josh is never considered a viable option for Lara Jean. It's repeatedly stated that she would never betray Margot and implied that she only has real feelings for Peter. Josh has an older brother affection for her, so there's hardly any romantic tension. When Peter comes into her life, the red fades away because she realizes her crush on Josh wasn't true love. He also isn't there for random conflict either. Instead, Josh represents the negative effects of lying. By avoiding Josh, Lara Jean loses one of her best friends and becomes a poor friend herself by not supporting him through a breakup. Josh showing up later is how the truth slips out to Margot, and how the lies get messy for Lara Jean. It's a situation she could have avoided had she been honest with Josh and Margot in the first place. Josh isn't an obstacle in the way of love, which often happens in a lot of teen movies. Instead, he's a lesson. When Lara Jean is finally honest with him, it's his advice that encourages her to be honest with herself. With the help of Josh, she learns to act on real feelings, not stay in her fantasy. This real love is associated with Peter, who I personally have a love-hate relationship with. Peter is a lacrosse jock and was Lara Jean's first kiss. After he receives her letter, he proposes they pretend to date so he can make his ex, Jen, jealous. Bonus is that Lara Jean can convince Josh she doesn't like him. Peter may be a typical jock in love with the mean girl, but his relationship with Lara Jean is decently complex. At least I can understand why Lara Jean falls for him. He isn't simply hot. Unlike Lara Jean, Peter has a real experience with love, not just book love. He helps her out of her comfort zone. She goes to events she would have otherwise avoided. He allows her to be vulnerable, whether it's about her fear of love or her guilt surrounding her late mom. He includes her little sister and sends her sweet love letters. Noah Centineo has been in a few not so great movies, but he is actually quite charming in this, and they have the cutest chemistry together. As far as relationships based on lies go, I really do not like fake dating, but I do like it better than the more common trope of a bet. One detail I love about their relationship is the color play between them. When they first make their fake dating pact, he wears blue and she wears pink, so they're totally separate. When they make their debut, he starts to wear her teal, signifying he's a part of her life, and they both wear yellow accents, signifying that they're a pair. A similar visual happens again in the pivotal hot tub scene. At the beginning, Peter is lit in blue and Lara Jean is in red. They're separate, just like the pact. She slowly allows herself to be vulnerable by dipping her toes in, then removes her red jacket, which is essentially her fear, and joins Peter in the blue lights. It's her first time jumping all in and the beginning of accepting her real feelings for him. But I'm still annoyed that he never gave her her scrunchie back when he promised he would, and how he was so late at standing up for her when their racy video leaked. Which, by the way, again, is another example of the negative effect of spreading lies. And after they kiss, Peter goes to Jen's room to break up with her, which is fine, but I'm not quite sure why he had to spend the night there. Nobody's perfect, obviously, and I much prefer a flawed love interest than a perfect Prince Charming. I do really like the touch of Lara Jean throwing out her romance books after they fight, because real life is not like in the books. But I don't know, some of these things just don't make sense to me. I also wish Peter learned something from Lara Jean, rather than all the growth being on Lara Jean's side. I guess he does bond with her about growing up with single parents, but I don't really think that that's enough. And Peter only gets worse in the second movie, and I truly could not understand Lara Jean's decision at the end. I still haven't watched the third one because I was so mad at the end of the second one. The most important aspect of any teen movie is the main character's growth. While Peter has his flaws, he does help Lara Jean grow by introducing adventure into her life. But instead of simply getting on the back of a motorcycle and feeling his abs, which honestly is quite concerning how often that trope is brought up, the way Lara Jean's risk-taking is communicated is much better. Pivotal decisions are represented by doorways and whether she walks through them or not. The first instance is at the house party. Lara Jean is convinced to go, despite not wanting to, and walks through the door. But she pauses, argues about going further, and self-soothes by putting up her hair. Peter stops her and compliments her hair down. With this added confidence, Lara Jean enters with a little less armor than she was expecting. Later, she shares her first vulnerable moment with Peter. Walking through this door led to a positive experience and self-development. Side note, but notice how even though Peter doesn't give Lara Jean her scrunchie back, she always wears her hair down after he compliments her on it. And before, she was always wearing it up. So maybe she doesn't need the scrunchie back anyway. The second doorway is when Peter tries convincing Lara Jean to go on the ski trip, another event she doesn't want to attend. This time, the door frame visually separates them because they are in conflict. By the end of the scene, neither of them walk through the frame, but the door is left open. Lara Jean tries to get out of going, but she eventually does go, and this leads to another moment of growth where she begins to accept her real feelings for Peter. Not all is perfect though, because the last door scene is when Peter comes to apologize for sleeping in Jen's room later that night. Lara Jean doesn't let him in. By closing this door, things take a turn for the worse with her lies, and they end with no closure. Peter isn't allowed to explain, and Lara Jean goes back to avoiding her feelings. Even though she eventually misses Peter, she tries to tell herself she never really lost him if their relationship wasn't real anyway. But she's just reverting back to her safe fantasy thinking. What's great about To All the Boys is that it's not just the guys that help Lara Jean grow, she also helps herself. This is often shown as one big moment in a teen movie, but with Lara Jean, there are several small steps that gracefully lead up to this moment. Since her biggest fear is reality, she learns to confront it. The first way she does this is by cleaning her room. As I mentioned, her messiness reflects her mental state, and her room emboldens her chronic fantasies. She tidies it after the sisters come clean to each other. Kitty for releasing Lara Jean's letters, and Lara Jean for explaining to Margot her feelings of Josh. When she cleans her room, she's deciding to start fresh, with no more lies. Then she confronts Jen for leaking the video, and realizes she isn't as invisible as she thought. This self-reflection is complemented by her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Finally, after encouragement from Josh, she faces her biggest fears. She conquers driving and tells Peter her real feelings to his face. Ending the movie by her confessing her feelings in a field is also so smart. It mirrors how their relationship started, this time with no contract, just trust. And it mirrors the beginning field of her fantasy with Josh, only this field and these feelings are real. To All the Boys also does an excellent job of focusing on family, not just boys. This is something I also really loved about 10 Things I Hate About You, which I've talked about in a previous video. I love the relationship she has with her sisters, Margot the older responsible one who she relies too heavily on, and Kitty the outgoing bratty one that ruins her life, but out of love. There are sweet connections to the sisters in the costume design. The vest that Lara Jean wears to the middle school dance is actually from Kitty's wardrobe, and the necklaces of Margot and Lara Jean reflect their relationship. In an interview, the costume designer explained that Lara Jean wears a heart locket and Margot has a key because Margot is the key to Lara Jean's heart. When Margot leaves, she wears an Aries necklace because Aries are known to be free-spirited and playful, and then when she comes back home, she wears a compass. I also really loved the dad. They have a couple of cute, heartwarming moments, and how there's a couple of Asian influences throughout the movie since Lara Jean is half Korean. We also see Lara Jean's relationships with Chris and Lucas grow, so this world feels quite big and relatable. It's not just focused on which boy will win her affection. To All the Boys definitely isn't the only good modern teen movie, but it's definitely one of the rare ones, especially in the rom-com genre. I really believe that all teen movies should strive to be good movies. Even if they are lighthearted and fun, they shouldn't just be mindless fluff. To All the Boys is also a great example that you can have a recipe for a completely average movie, and just by making subtle tweaks and prioritizing quality, you really can turn generic into genius. If you're a chronic daydreamer, remember that nothing bad or good can happen if you just think about it. I literally had to tell myself that when I started this YouTube channel, and I'm so glad I did because I absolutely love making videos and hearing what you guys have to say about them. Hope you have a good night, guys, and thank you so much for watching.